Switched on IT is proudly brought to you by computer troubleshooters Toowoomba West, technology solved, and Oz Hosting, cloud made easy.
Welcome to Switched on IT. This is the show where we talk about everything IT. This week we have our regular panelists with us, Doug Endersby from Oz Hosting and Ray Sidney Smith from W3 Consulting in the United States. Today we're going to talk about endpoint security. In the off-camera session prior to this, I was talking to Ray about what endpoint security is all about, and he suggested that it's a little bit like a castle, and endpoint security is the moat and the drawbridge around your castle so that it stops people from attacking the castle. So it's basically the first step that you can take at your end to stop people from accessing your data and hacking into your computer. Now, if you, at the end of this session, if you have any questions about this that you would like answered, be sure to send us an email or get onto the website and send us a message. And ask any questions you want. We'll take them back to Doug and Ray, and they can answer them for you in a future session. Now, Doug and Ray are now waiting on the other end. So, good evening, gentlemen.
Evening. Good morning. How are we going, Barry?
Yes, good, thanks. Now, I've just introduced this subject to our viewers. Doug and Ray, tell us, please, how we protect ourselves from hackers in the internet at endpoint security.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. And just as we sort of kick this off, I think firstly, good analogy with the castle and the drawbridge and the moat, because that's really the way it works. You know, I'm sitting here in my castle in Sydney. In the sun, as you can see, and you know, the first point in the journey of any internet traffic to and from me sitting here is my modem. The modem is then connected to a router which has a number of ports in it, which then go off to different parts of the house. Where if you've got a wired connection, you can plug into a wall socket. But you know, at the moment, I'm sitting on Wi-Fi, so. Clearly, there's got to be ways that we can, you know, that we can protect all of that.
Yeah.
Yes. So they're the sort of different points along the journey of internet traffic into our building, and just to emphasise also how important this can be, and this is a real life example. One of the largest data centre operators in Australia. I received an email from the head of sales, and I was probably one of thousands of people that received an email from the head of sales. It was a phishing attack. It had some hyperlinks inside it. It clearly was a very dangerous email, and I recognised it as a phishing attack. But I went back to the head of sales, who I actually knew personally. I'd met the person. What had happened was that this fellow was at a conference during the week, and then on the Friday, the last day of the conference, he went out Friday evening with work colleagues and and friends, and had left his laptop in his hotel room, connected to a Wi-Fi service, and that was when somebody hacked his computer, was able to see all of his contacts in his email client, and you know, orchestrate that phishing attack. So, you know, the ability of us as users to make sure that the internet access that we have is secure is really important. You know, this was a very unfortunate, very dangerous incident. You know, when you're the lead guy in a multi data center, large data center operator, you really want to make sure that you've got everything locked down. So Ray, there's my little anecdote. The first point of call on internet traffic coming into the building I'm in here is the modem, which in this case has been provided by Telstra, which is one of the largest telco in Australia. If we can sort of step through, what can I do with the modem, and then I've got the router. The router is then obviously able to be accessed and programmed by myself. What should I do with the router, and are there any sort of special tips and hints as far as Wi-Fi access is concerned? So starting with the modem, what do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, understanding what endpoint security means generally for you is going to be kind of the first step, right? Which is all of the various tools you just talked about, the router and a modem. Sometimes those are the same thing, sometimes they're not in some businesses. But any real device that touches the outside world is in essence an endpoint. It allows someone who's a hacker to be able to access that data and potentially do harm to business or home that it might be trying to affect. And so endpoint security is a software security approach, right? Where we look to try and protect the software of those devices that are touching the outside world. And you said Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is probably one of the most prevalent ways in which localized hackers, someone who has what's called a sniffer, where they're driving around and capable of pulling data away from Wi-Fi that might be unprotected, or grabbing Wi-Fi passwords that might be unprotected from devices and so on and so forth. So the first tip, of course, is to make sure that you trust the people who are producing the software on which you're accessing the internet, as well as what's receiving the internet and connecting your network to the devices inside of the network. So to unpack that a little bit, think about, if you have a router, you should be talking to your internet service provider and the router and modem, if they're provided together as a package, talking to them about is it updated? Is the software actually up to date? You'll be surprised that it likely is not, that it hasn't been updated since you got it. Sometimes it hasn't been updated for a year since before you got it. The reason for that is that they buy these things in very large numbers, and then they get distributed to technicians who install internet service at your home or office, and then it gets put into use. They don't necessarily auto-update. So they're not pushing those updates to you, and you don't see it. You just kind of set the router in place unless the internet's not working. Most people know how to power cycle a router, right? You unplug it, you plug it back in, you turn it off, you turn it on. And as long as the internet's working, you don't particularly care about what's happening on the box, except that box or boxes are really your first line of defense. They're the moat and the drawbridge and the walls of the castle protecting the inhabitants, as we talked about earlier. So you really need to make sure that you are working with whoever your ISP is to make sure that those things are up to date. So I think that's where most endpoint security should be identified. And when we think about the NIST framework for cybersecurity, it's about identifying, protecting, and then detecting as the first three steps of that process. And really, endpoint security protection should really be helping you identify, protect, and detect when something happens on those endpoints.
Is your computer driving you crazy? Is it slow or doing things you didn't expect? Well, having a computer crash or pick up a virus can be a complete nightmare for a business, so having someone local you can trust to get you up and running again is critical. The dedicated team of experts at Computer Troubleshooters Toowoomba West will put your mind at ease from the moment you walk through the door and will get your problem solved in no time, with a 100% guarantee on their work. Laptops, tablets, PCs, whatever you have, Roger and the team can fix it for you. So visit them today at 236 Bridge Street, Newtown. Can't get in to see them? No worries. Just call them on 4642 1331 and they'll come to you. Toowoomba Troubleshooters Toowoomba West on the web at www.computertroubleshooters.com.au/Toowoomba West.
Hutchie's lives here. We're locals, just like you. To us, construction is really about people, not just bricks and concrete. It's people who bring our structures to life and build communities. We stick by the people who make communities. From Toowoomba Rugby League to RACQ Lifelight Rescue Service, Milne Bay Military Challenge, and the Toowoomba Tennis International, Hutchies is proud to back the people who support the region.
Oz Hosting is proud to support Switched On IT in bringing practical help to Australian businesses. We're talking to literally hundreds of businesses every day about their IT services, how to make them more efficient, how to make their businesses more efficient, and how to protect their valuable data. If you'd like your IT services securely hosted right here in Australia and expertly managed, talk to Oz Hosting.
Power TV Australia and Power FM will be broadcasting at Queen's Park in a live simulcast from the Toowoomba Christmas Wonderland on December 20 from 7 p.m. We'll be chatting to a few of the people that make it happen and find out how it all comes together. So make it a date, December 20th, 7 p.m. at the Toowoomba Christmas Wonderland for the live simulcast between Power TV Australia and Power FM.
Now, thinking about the I guess particularly the modem has got a dedicated connection to the router, and the router is the device that typically people have their blue RJ45 cables connected to, and it's typically the device that has a couple of little black antennas poking out of it. And I know that's sort of that's programmable and you can access it. One of the things that I'm aware of actually is that for most of these devices, you've got to be connected to them physically before you can actually make any changes to their settings, don't you? So I guess that gives us some level of protection. But what are the sort of settings that you would recommend that people do on their router?
Yeah, sure. So if you want to start at the lowest level, as I said, keep your software up to date. I mean, that will protect you, say 80%. If we're taking the Pareto principle here, that's the best level of protection, is to just keep them up to date. But secondarily, when they send you those boxes, they frequently have a randomized way of either setting a password, or they use one general administrative username and password for all of the devices of that make and model. And so the first thing to do is to go in and change that username and password that helps you log in. Now, as you noted earlier, some of them will restrict you from being able to access it over wireless. But as soon as you connect to a Wi-Fi network, and if you can go to 192.168.1 or 192.168.1.1 or 192.168.0.1, one of those
10.1.1.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So once you get to one of those, it'll say it on the box or on the bottom of the router itself how to access the administrative panel. If you can do that via wireless, which is fine, just know that anyone in proximity that can access your Wi-Fi can potentially penetrate and get access to it also. So going into the settings and just like reviewing the settings are really helpful. Even if you don't know what they mean, most often than not, the settings in the administrative console will tell you. It'll have a little question mark icon or an I for information icon. You can kind of click on those and it'll tell you, oh, this does this or that does that. I highly recommend that for all the devices that you have inside the home, that you take note of what is accessing the system. It'll give you a list of all the devices connecting. If it's a device that you don't understand why it's connected, then you can end and sever that connection and then go ahead and figure out whether or not you needed it connected. Many times we connect all of these devices that might be insecure, and especially in the Internet of Things, in the IoT space, right? We have a light bulb connected that we had, 5 years ago or 4 years ago or whatever, and now that light bulb is still connected, and anybody can really hack a light bulb. And so be mindful of old technology that might be sitting around and potentially causing harm to you. So I would do that. I would certainly turn off any ports. If you know what ports are, they're the way in which we connect to a specific area of our access to the internet. And so turn off any ports that you're not using. So you have an internet port, typically port 80 or port 8080, one of those, and then decide whether or not you're going to eliminate all the other port access entries. If you're not doing anything fairly sophisticated with your network, you're just accessing your internet for your computers and your mobile devices, you likely don't need any other ports open to the public. So turning off those ports. And I think, for the most part, update your software, poke around the settings, and if it gives you any additional advanced security options, I say use them. Look them up, do a little Google search, and if the security setting looks like it's something that would be helpful to you, I would do it.
Mm-hmm. And presumably, when we're looking at our little router, we'll be able to see the model number and manufacturer details, and we should be able to get a reasonable amount of information online about how to do make some of these changes. Hopefully, there might even be some YouTube videos or something like that. That's something that I draw on quite frequently. There's also the ability when you're connected to your router to sort of lock down the devices that can actually connect through the Wi-Fi using the MAC address, the machine address of each individual endpoint will have somewhere a MAC address, which hopefully people can find on whatever device it is that they're using. Do you recommend limiting Wi-Fi access to known devices?
Yeah. So at a point in which you feel like you might be open to specific types of security attacks, that is, you feel like you could be the target of one. Most often than not, no one cares about you individually. What happens is that in the onslaught of various options, you show up as a part of some attack, a localized attack. Someone's driving by your business and they're sniffing for potential weaknesses, and then they come across a network that's insecure like yours, or can be hacked because of a known security flaw, and then they're able to get in and do damage. One way to mitigate that, of course, is what you're talking about, which is the idea of registering MAC addresses so only those devices can access. Unfortunately, if you have a security flaw on the endpoint, not limiting your own access within the network is not necessarily going to help. But what's really great is you can actually, in a lot of these systems, you can actually go into kind of a dark mode, and that's not it's not the best security. It's not going to solve all of them, but it will help to some extent. And what that means is you can choose not to broadcast, what we call broadcasting, the SSID or the network. So you can actually silence the existence of the network unless the devices connecting to it knows that Wi-Fi point exists at all. Does that make sense? So you, in essence, so you basically tell your router, if it has that capability, you tell that router, I want to not show my SSID at all in that list. When you open up your laptop or phone and you're looking for Wi-Fi networks, if some stranger walks up to the network, it will not show unless they know the exact name of the network. And so while I find it, some companies actually broadcast the name of their network as part of their branding, right? They want people to know that they're around. Some networks are being given as guest networks to their customers who are in their stores, completely understandable. But if you have a private network that you're trying to protect, and you believe that you're kind of being targeted by some particular type of group, or if you're in a particular industry like financial services, you want to make sure those SSIDs are completely silenced, so that most hackers are not going to be able to find you. Maybe some more sophisticated ones will be able to, but most run-of-the-mill smash and grab hackers are not going to really find your network that way. And then the other side is that you can then limit the devices on the network, and really that ends up being about network segmentation that gets a little bit more sophisticated than I think we want to get into here. But if you want to create different networks within your network that are exclusive to certain types of data, for example, you can create a network that is just for your IoT devices. So all the your refrigerator that's IoT, and your light bulbs, and your Google Home, and your Amazon Alexa, and those kinds of things, those will all be I don't know that one. My Alexa is talking to me right now. So you can go ahead. Yes, exactly. You can segment them to another network so that they don't have access to the other devices on the network, which they don't and shouldn't need access to those other networks while still getting internet connection. So you can create these levels of segmentation, and then those devices, you can say, yes, only the MAC address of this device can be connected to the network. And now you have fairly secure segmentation of the network. And I think that's a good helpful piece. Another thing that you can do that's a little bit more sophisticated is that you can actually, and this is more for data privacy than it is for most anything else, but in a data privacy perspective, you can actually set up a VPN, and many VPNs allow this, where you can actually log in and set up the VPN on the router itself. So what happens is your connection to the internet through your ISP, that is running through your router, when you send data to the internet, to access the internet, your ISP, your internet service provider, can see all that data, right? They're looking at it all. It's all out in the open for them, right? And I don't know about you, but I don't want my ISP to know what I'm doing. I want them to provide the service. They're providing the bridge to the internet. But what's happening is they're looking inside the car, the vehicles, as they're driving over the bridge, right? They're doing a deep, kind of inspection. It's as though there were a bunch of police vehicles with bomb sniffing dogs, opening up every car door that passed along the bridge and did a thorough search of those vehicles, almost to the effect of like an illegal search of your systems, but they're capable of doing this. And so a VPN, what it does is it puts up a tunnel across that bridge so that when you go out to the internet and what you access on the internet and exchange back and forth is completely masked from the ISP. So from my point to the point of where I connect to the server for data, that's all encrypted. That's what we call tunneling. And so in essence, you get a new layer of privacy on top of any HTTP or HTTPS or any other protocol that you're sending across the network. And so I find that to just be a very useful way to do it. You can use a VPN. They usually cost maybe tens of dollars per year, and say $40 or $50 US per year, and you then set that up on your router, and now all of the devices that connect within your network are now being encrypted out to the internet. So your ISP and nobody else, it's not just your ISP. Once it leaves your business or your home, it's out there on other servers. None of those other servers en route to the server you're connecting to pull that data down is getting access to that information. That's actually a very good security provisioning.
Is your computer driving you crazy? Is it slow or doing things you didn't expect? Well, having a computer crash or pick up a virus can be a complete nightmare for a business, so having someone local you can trust to get you up and running again is critical. The dedicated team of experts at Computer Troubleshooters Toowoomba West will put your mind at ease from the moment you walk through the door and will get your problem solved in no time with a 100% guarantee on their work. Laptops, tablets, PCs, whatever you have, Roger and the team can fix it for you. So visit them today at 236 Bridge Street, Newtown. Can't get in to see them? No worries. Just call them on 4642 1331 and they'll come to you. Toowoomba Troubleshooters Toowoomba West on the web at www.computertroubleshooters.com.au/Toowoomba West.
Hutchies lives here. We're locals, just like you. To us, construction is really about people, not just bricks and concrete. It's people who bring our structures to life and build communities. We stick by the people who make communities. From Toowoomba Rugby League to RACQ Lifelight Rescue Service, Milne Bay Military Challenge, and the Toowoomba Tennis International, Hutchies is proud to back the people who support the region.
Oz Hosting is proud to support Switched On IT in bringing practical help to Australian businesses. We're talking to literally hundreds of businesses every day about their IT services, how to make them more efficient, how to make their businesses more efficient, and how to protect their valuable data. If you'd like your IT services securely hosted right here in Australia and expertly managed, talk to Oz Hosting.
Power TV Australia and Power FM will be broadcasting at Queen's Park in a live simulcast from the Toowoomba Christmas Wonderland on December 20 from 7 p.m. We'll be chatting to a few of the people that make it happen and find out how it all comes together. So make it a date, December 20th, 7 p.m. at the Toowoomba Christmas Wonderland for the live simulcast between Power TV Australia and Power FM.
So the virtual private network that which is a service that I buy, and just for our Australian audience, I think you can probably buy an annual plan for about $150 Australian, and I think that would allow. I think it allows multiple devices or uses, but Ray, to your point, if the device that you're actually authorizing for the virtual private network connection is your router, for instance, then it's really only one device that you're using in that plan. Now, clearly, one aspect of this is essentially hiding or de-identifying all the traffic that goes from the router in the building, in our business here in the building, to the provider of the virtual private network. So, potentially you'd want to choose a VPN provider that has an endpoint, a hosting service, or I guess a point of presence or multiple points of presence around the world. So if I'm in Australia, I want the VPN provider to have a point of presence in Australia, so I don't get a laggy internet connection. And then, but in that hop between my router and their servers in their data center, wherever that is, hopefully inside Australia, presumably it's not just that the telcos can't actually analyze that information. That's got to protect my devices that are now connected to that network connection from any potential hacking, doesn't it? Because it becomes, unless you're an extremely sophisticated, perhaps state-sponsored attacker, you're not going to get through that, are you?
No. So in what you're talking about, so APTs, advanced persistent threats, those are typically very well orchestrated threat actors, typically governments. Unless it's really an APT or someone who's very sophisticated, VPN is going to provide a high level of protection from your common hackers. It's just not worth it for them to put that kind of resources into you. Because remember that they don't necessarily care about you individually. They care about the idea that the low-hanging fruit, that is the majority of us who are not protecting ourselves, are just easy pickings. So they go after those things. So if you show any level of raising the drawbridge, to continue the analogy, they're not going to swim across the moat. It's just not worth it to them. So any level of security provisioning, not any level, but some level of security provisioning, then gives them that note that, oh, okay, these people are going to give me trouble. I just don't want to deal with that, right? So you want to give those signals, and a VPN is one of those signals to let them know this is going to be more difficult than it's worth, because what are they going to find, right? And so they'll just back away because it's not worth it. I also don't want people to think that VPNs provide you more security than they do, but they do provide a very good indicator to hackers not to bother you, and they do provide a good level of security for data privacy and data protection on the tunneling side of those devices that are connecting to the internet. And so I think that can be really useful. Another really fun endpoint security construct is that there are actually software that you can install on routers as well, and on modems to some extent, that actually are antiviral. So you can have these malware detection software, and so sometimes they're called an IDS, or an intrusion detection system, and those are they're sitting on the devices to be able to identify whether or not someone is trying to access the system. And sometimes you can, if you want to get really, really sophisticated, you can buy what's called a honeypot. And there are several of these on the market. And honeypots are, in essence, devices that you connect to as a part of your endpoint security strategy, and just go online and type in honeypot, security or something like that, and you'll be able to find one of these devices. And what they do is they act like treasure troves of what hackers go after, right? And so they mimic, say, an exposed server, or they mimic a database that looks like just a server holding a database full of wonderful contact information of your business clients. So it does this kind of mimicry. So it makes itself look like something that a hacker would want. And then, of course, the hacker then tries to go after that data. And the moment the hacker does, just like a honeypot, they get stuck, right? And so they now get blocked by virtue of going after that data. And so you can make the systems look like almost anything you want to on the network. An exposed computer just sitting there unprotected with an open admin blank password. You can make it look like a server. You can make it look like all kinds of things, right? A web server that's just sitting there with a Linux distro on it, and then Apache or something like that on it, and you can then put that on your network. And then when the hacker comes by and says, "Ooh, look at this little thing," then they're identified and immediately blocked, so they can no longer access your system. And every time they try to go after any number of different types of honeypots within the system, because you can actually set up many of them, right? So you can broadcast these different types of signals to hackers, and then whenever they try to go after those things, they get duped into being blocked by virtue of the fact that they have gone after those things. So it can be a very effective tool. Again, are you the one being focused on? Is your company being focused on? And if your company's being focused on, then you should really get a data security person to come in and really do an audit to help you beef up your security. But that is one way of doing that. If you think that for some reason you have a heightened risk, is that you can do a honeypot.
Sure. Okay, so I think we've got some good, first level, probably reasonably easy to execute security measures that business owners can take, potentially even without having to call an IT guy. So listing them off there, Ray, I think you said, number one, access your router and make sure that the software is up to date. Number two, change the default password. Number three, closed off any of the ports that you don't seem to need. You'd probably, for most people, that should be quite an adequate approach. If you want to take some more stringent levels of security, maybe use the unique machine address, the MAC address, for each device that connects via Wi-Fi, and make sure that you limit the ability of a device to connect to your router by ensuring that only a known MAC address, which means one of your devices that's trying to access it by Wi-Fi, has permission, and no other devices have got permission to access your router by Wi-Fi. I think you made a good point about the Internet of Things and the way we've got different devices these days. I've got an audio receiver that is connected to the Wi-Fi system. Using Google Music and or Sonos. We've got all these different devices in our homes now. That would be one thing where you might want to actually understand how that's accessing your Wi-Fi and lock that down. And then we get to the, and this is, I don't know that too many people would consider this. I certainly would, and that is to use a virtual private network service to basically hide my connection from my router to the virtual private network provider, which then connects me obviously to my ISP service. I think there's some usable sort of tips and hints there. Barry, you're sitting back there. Have you got anything you'd like to add, or any questions you'd like to ask?
Yeah, thanks, guys. As I've been listening to your conversation, I've had my mind boggling here. And I wonder whether for businesses, Doug, you might be able to answer this, if a business is concerned and doesn't have the ability to do these things themselves, and I have contact with businesses that would simply say, well, I don't know anything about this, I can't do anything. Who can they go to get help from?
Look, I'll jump in first there, but Ray, tell me what you think. I think one of the challenges with your network security is that you need to kind of have somebody who's on site that has a physical connection to the devices most of the time. And the physical connection could be through the Wi-Fi, but you've still got to be close enough to be in the Wi-Fi network. So that can mean you either have somebody that comes on locally, or you're able to do a screen sharing session. And our guys, our support folks at Oz Hosting are often doing screen sharing sessions with people that are, for example, trying to connect their workstation to a backup server, and there might be a firewall or a switch on the local network which blocks their ability to actually allow the backup to occur. And so I think potentially some of the remote IT service providers could, they would be a less expensive. It's less expensive to try and have an IT specialist do it remotely through a screen sharing session than to have somebody come in, who's going to be, potentially a network engineer and quite expensive. But I'd say, Barry, if the person is not competent to log into their router and start to make some changes, they either need somebody that can provide remote support, and if that doesn't work, then there's no other choice but to get somebody in. Ray, do you have anything to add to that?
Before you answer that, Ray, Doug, this show is sponsored by Computer Troubleshooters Toowoomba West. Is that are they the kind of people that people could contact?
Yeah, I know the team there, and they are definitely the right sort of folks to get in. I'd be, if I was in Toowoomba, I'd be contacting somebody like Computer Troubleshooters Toowoomba West, and if they can't do it remotely, then by all means have one of their guys come in and set it up for you. That's a really user-friendly and low-risk way of getting that outcome.
Terrific. Okay, now, Ray, you were going to respond to a question that I interrupted.
No, I think Doug answered it. The only difference I would have is that everybody in the organization is responsible for cybersecurity, because all it takes is one person who clicks on an email that, as Doug opened up with the story about that person who was subject to that phishing attack. All it takes is one person to click on an email for the entire compromise, the compromising of the network. And while we're talking about endpoint security, I think that if you're going to look at something like that, I think that a service like Roger has that provides regular service to businesses and is capable of helping you is great. But the flip side to that is that you need to do a little bit of training to get your employees aware of some of these issues. So just a little bit of training goes a long way, and it doesn't take a lot. I mean, as Doug said, you can find all of this on YouTube. You can find all of the training that's necessary to get people to understand. After watching us and hearing what we're talking about, taking down just the keywords and searching for each of those items and making sure that you understand it now, and then going ahead and making sure that each of your employees understands what those are, at least in concept, and then saying these are the things we need to make sure happens, and then doing them. If you need someone technical to come in and execute some of them, that's perfectly fine. But ultimately, if everyone in the organization isn't on some level aware of what they are doing internally that's potentially exposing cybersecurity risk, then all of the front end stuff is ornamental. You want to really make sure that the innards of the organization knows that when something gets through, be suspicious, be skeptical of really every email. And that's not an excuse to say you're ignoring your boss because you thought the email was skeptical. It was suspicious that he asked you to do something or she asked you to do something. But more to the effect that, when you look at an email and it just looks off, that's the absolute time when you should pick up the phone and call whomever and say, hey, did you send me this email? This happened to me actually today. I received an email where a client asked me for their username and password, and it was just written weird enough that I said, you know what, I'm just picking up the phone and calling. And it turned out that it was him. He was asking me for that information. And then I chided him for asking me to email login details.
Yes.
I'm just not doing that. And then I was able to transfer the information. But that could have easily have been a phishing attack. It could have easily been some hacker who got access and was able to spoof the email and get it over to me. So just be skeptical about these kinds of communique that could or could not be somebody else.
Okay, that's terrific. This has been a complicated but really critical and important issue, especially today. So thank you for your time, gentlemen, and we will see you again next week.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Ray.
Take care.
You've been watching Switched on IT. We have had Doug and Ray with us again today, talking about endpoint security. And this is a really critical subject. And many of you will be very aware of the kinds of issues, and it's in the news quite frequently, with hackers trying to get your information and so on. And it can be quite daunting for business owners sometimes. So don't forget our sponsors, Toowoomba Troubleshooters, Computer Troubleshooters Toowoomba West, have an excellent service that you can access. Their details are on the bottom of the screen now. Make sure you give them a call if you think you need an audit, or if you want them to help you set up your security. Follow the steps that Ray and Doug have suggested, and make sure that your castle is protected and that your moat and drawbridge are in place. This has been Barry for Switched on IT. We'll see you again next week.